UFOs. Been waiting to give an update on this one. Now, the top line is we brought everybody the news about the UFO Transparency Amendment. It was included by the Senate, specifically Senator Chuck Schumer and Mike Rounds. It was a bipartisan bill. It actually passed the Senate with like 87 votes. Massive support. It ended up, unfortunately, being gutted in the House of Representatives, specifically by two individuals, Mike Rogers and Turner. These two individuals were very close ties to the intelligence community, basically working at the behest of the Pentagon and the CIA to kill any transparency efforts, which would have required both the setting up commissions, would have required mandatory disclosure. A lot of people in the UFO community are actually very upset about this. And they're also now highlighting a very interesting speech which was given by Senator Schumer yesterday upon the passage of the NDAA, where he protested against the House of Representatives stripping out these transparency blocks and specifically said, based upon presumably what he knows, he gets the highest level of intelligence briefing, of a genuine cover-up that's taking place here. Here's what Senator Schumer had to say.
Closure Act that he and I co-sponsored, and portions of which we will pass in the NDAA. I say to my friend, that unidentified unanimous phenomena are of immense interest and curiosity to the American people. But with that curiosity comes the risk for confusion, disinformation, and mistrust, especially if the government isn't prepared to be transparent. The United States government has gathered a great deal of information about UAPs over many decades, but has refused to share it with the American people. That is wrong. And additionally, it breeds mistrust. We've also been notified by multiple credible sources that information on UAPs has also been withheld from Congress, which, if true, is a violation of the laws requiring full notification to the legislative branch.
A lot of important things there.
That's
talking about.
Pretty wild.
It is, and it's like these things just happen and they float into the ether and everybody thinks it's too wacky, so they don't want to cover it. I mean, this is a Senate Majority Leader. Now, look, politicians lie all the time, but one of the reasons why I thought the legislation was so important is it doesn't rely on individual testimony of a whistleblower, or of a legislator, of I saw this, or my uncle saw that, or any of that. It was straight up like, look, if you have info, you have to legally disclose it. That's it. It's very simple. And I think it's very telling that they ended up covering it up. Now, Dave Grush, the initial UFO whistleblower, kind of sparked a lot of this, gave some of his reaction on News Nation immediately after. Here's what he had to say.
What we're witnessing right now is, quite frankly, the greatest legislative failure in American history. You know, you had a very strong amendment for government transparency on this issue. Whether you believe my allegations or not, we need to advocate for the executive branch, you know, the office of the president through executive action, to instate such a body to advise him on the best course of action now that, you know, Congress has failed to legislate appropriately.
Yeah, well, I would hope to see that. I'm not going to hold my breath. And I think that's the unfortunate part of it, is that there's no statutory things that are in place. One of the reasons why the JFK Records Assassination Act was so important was because it let everybody see in the open every time they push declassification. We all know what's happening here. But the fact is that previously they could just pretend they moved on. We already had the Warren Commission. Just got rid of the Warren Commission. And then they opened it up, and then they still have parts of it declassified. Why? Everybody involved is dead. Or you just don't want us to know truly what happened. I think the fact that now we have to rely on presidents, I mean, if you have to rely on the capricious political leanings of the executive branch, you're already screwed. You're screwed. Yeah. I will say the only hopeful note that I've been told is that there were a lot of people who were inside the government who were really reliant on this legislation. They want to do the right thing. They're like, I don't want to go through the official channels, this and this. But if Congress is going to engage in a full-blown cover-up, you know, at the behest, then they're going to have to come out and quote-unquote unauthorized, uncontrolled type disclosure. So it's possible, actually, we'll see even more than we might have through a legal process. But you have to always remember, a lot of these people are terrified of being prosecuted and thrown in jail for the rest of their life, or worse, you know, which is we've seen some allegations. So curious what you think, Krystal.
Yeah, I think your analogy to the JFK Records Act is really important, because it's not like that solved the problem, but it gave people a tool so that you could sue and say, hey, this is what you're required to do under law. You're not meeting your obligations, and so we're going to take you to court. And also, it exposed the lack of transparency because you could see the shortfall between what they were supposed to do and what they were actually doing. So I think, that's a very analogous situation here. And it also reminds me similarly of the Stock Act, which required disclosure of stock trades. And it's not that that solved corruption in government, but again, it gave good government activists and grassroots activists in the public a tool where you could see at least some of what's going on and expose it. You could also see the gaps between what people are supposed to disclose and what they are actually disclosing and how often they're failing to disclose what they're required to under that regulation. So to me, it sort of fits in a similar category here. I want to know more from you, Saagar, about what you made of Schumer's comments, because to me that was pretty extraordinary to have Chuck Schumer, I can't imagine he would just make accusations like that willy-nilly. Has he been which side of this has he been on? Has he been a real transparency advocate, or
Chuck
has he been, kind of in the middle, or what's the deal?
Chuck is a recent convert.
Okay.
Kind of came out of nowhere. We're not really sure why, but we'll take it. Look, I have no idea. He's a member of the Gang of Eight. The Gang of Eight are the people who are supposedly the members of Congress who get the most insight to the U.S. intelligence community.
Yeah.
Although, you can't necessarily rely on that. If I had to guess, maybe he had somebody who came to him. He was moved very much by Dave Grush or some other whistleblowers, others who had spoken to him. This actually happens a lot. You'll have people who are in the government. They'll go to a member of Congress because members of Congress also have security clearance. They're like, here's what I know and here's what's happening inside the government. And then the Congress will come. This is kind of like the Church Committee, many other transparency efforts. They will come through because they have clearance, and then they will enforce a provision in the government which will require then disclosure. But I mean, the exact statement from Schumer is that there is an actual cover-up.
Right.
He says, for the government to obtain any recovered UAP material or biological remains that may have been provided to private entities in the past and thereby hidden from Congress and the American people. That's a direct quote from Senator Rounds, an Idaho senator, a Republican here, who is working with Senator Schumer. I mean, they are alleging, effectively saying that they have knowledge of something. Same too with Grush. If you look a little bit more and you dig into some of the things that he's talked about, he's now saying he's got some firsthand knowledge of things that happened. And I get it. Everybody who's watching this is frustrated because they're like, oh, it's always a guy, heard from a guy. And I agree. I don't want to rely on Dave Grush. I don't want to rely on Chuck Schumer. I don't want to rely on Mike Rounds or any of these other people that have come out because you can't prove any of that. I want something you can see in my hands, like documents. That's why some of all the stuff from the past, to me, all these government records about Roswell, about Blue Book, about the cover-ups and the history, and I've talked about all that. That's so compelling to me because these are the people who are actually involved in the program who lied about Roswell, then came out and then wrote down, classified records, all that didn't come out for decades later. And you read this and you can't even believe, some of what you're saying. Most of it we've now moved past. So for the Disclosure Act, unfortunately, I was even led to believe by a lot of people involved. They said they thought they really were going to get past it, but it really does seem that the two individuals here, Turner and Rogers, it was a absolute non-starter. They were like, this was tier 1 top priority. And then you got to ask yourself, why? Imagine the JFK thing. If a member of Congress who had such big ties to CIA and Pentagon just blocked the JFK, or somebody like Arlen Specter, if anybody remembers he was a senator from Pennsylvania. He was on the Warren Commission and he came up with the magic bullet theory. Imagine if at the time that he was lobbying hard openly in the public against JFK assassination. We all know what's happening there. We know why. And yet somehow with this, the press, everybody just moves past it. It's like me and a bunch of other guys on Twitter. I don't understand it. I think everybody just thinks it's wacky and they think it's, they don't want to be tainted by looking like a kook. But this is the Senate Majority Leader. This is not, this isn't just Daily Mail articles and things like that are happening. Well,
and the other dynamic that could be playing out here is, members of Congress can really get in their feelings when there's like a turf war and an ego battle too. Like if they feel like they're being lied to and members of the executive branch are not being upfront with them, that can create a certain dynamic there. But also, so it's Turner and Rogers who are so isn't Turner the guy who worked in the defense industry and takes tons of aerospace
one of the top
and defense?
Aerospace defense contractor in terms of donations. It's out in the open.
And wasn't he FBI?
Yeah, exactly. This is what I'm saying.
Just checking that I had the right people in my head.
Yeah. Look, Grush did an interview with Tucker Carlson yesterday. I recommend you look at it. He continues to speak out, and props to the guy. I'm trying to get him here on the show as well. I'd like to talk to him a little bit. But in general, what you continue to, it's everything you have now is out in the open. So it's up to you. And also it's up to a lot of us. Like, we got close this time around. Maybe we can do it next time, but it's going to take a long time, I think. This is evidence of just how big of an uphill battle that people face. Just again, to get official transparency. I don't know why it should be so difficult, but maybe it tells us something.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.